Hello students, today's focus is factoring polynomials. The objective is students will be able to find the greatest common factor of the terms of a polynomial, use the structure of a polynomial and the understanding that polynomials form a system similar to integers to rewrite it in a factored form. The essential understanding for this lesson is the greatest common factor of the terms of a polynomial is the greatest common factor of the coefficients, and the variable or variables using the number of instances of the variable that are common to each term. Let's take in consideration a few examples. We're starting with example number 1. Find the greatest common factor. Finding the greatest common factor. Now, the essential question for this lesson is how is factoring a polynomial similar to factoring integers? Let's translate the question in Spanish first.
¿Cuál es el máximo común divisor, m, c, d, de los términos de 12 por x a la quinta potencia, más 8 por x a la cuarta potencia, menos 6 por x al cubo?
What is the greatest common factor, GCF, of the terms of 12 times x to the fifth power plus 8 times x to the fourth power minus 6 times x cubed?
Okay, let's take a look at the solution. The step number 1 to find the greatest common factor is to write the prime factorization of the coefficients for each term to determine if there is a greatest common factor other than 1. As you see here, the coefficients here, 12, 8, and 6. So we see and we figure out the prime factorization. So in 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. For the coefficient 8, we have 2 times 2 times 2. And for 6, we have 2 times 3. So one instance of 2 is the only common factor of the numbers. So the GCF of the coefficients of this trinomial is 2. As you see, what they have in common, both coefficients, is 2. So the prime factor is going to be 2. Step number 2. Determine the greatest common factor for the variables of each term. Now we see the variables. The first variable is x to the fifth power. X to the fifth power, we break it down. X times x times x times x times x times x. 5 times. And the second variable is x to the fourth power. As you see, guys, how I'm breaking down the variables and coefficients. X to the fourth power is x times x times x times x. And the third variable is x to the third power. So it's x times x times x. As you see here, the red x's are in common, right? So both variables have 3 x's on it. So their 3 instances of x are the only common factors of the terms. So the GCF stands for greatest common factor of the variables is x to the third power, or x cubic. So the greatest common factor of the terms of 12 to x to the fifth power plus 8x to the fourth power minus 6x to the third power is 2x cubic. Okay, now let me give you a study tip for the next is coming up. Recall finding the prime factorization if a number is expressing the number as a product of only prime factors. Now, the second will be posted in Google Docs as I did last time. So you have to watch the video, you have to copy the equations, both equations, and you have to find the greatest common factor of the terms of each polynomial. I'll be grading this. This will be graded as a class work. Make sure you will finish the exam, try 2 examples. Let's move to the second example. Factor out. How do I factor out the greatest common factor? Let's see one example. Okay, let me read it. Let me translate this in Spanish.
¿Por qué resulta útil aislar el MCD de un polinomio?
Why is it helpful to factor out the GCF from a polynomial?
Okay, let's see why is it help. Okay, consider the polynomial of negative 12x to the third power plus 18x to the second power minus 27x. Step 1. In step 1, we find the GCF of the terms of the polynomial if there is one. Because the first term is negative, it is helpful to factor out -1. As you see here, we factor out -1 because it's a negative number. And then we start 2 times 2 times 3. These are the coefficients. 2 times 2 times 3. 2 times 2 is 4 times 3 is 12. How we break it down. Now, what about x to the third power? It's x times x times x. So 3 times itself. What about 8x squared? Again, we do have, what did we say about -1? It's helpful to factor out -1. So it's -2 times 3 times 3 to make the coefficients 18, because -2 times -1 is +2 times 3 is 18. Times x, and -27x is same thing. -1 times 3 times 3 times 3 times x, and it gives us -27x. So the greatest common factor, as you see, it's -3x. Negative. So we have 3x, 3x, 3x. So the greatest common factor is 3x. Step number 2. Step 2, factor out the GCF. Factor out the greatest common factor. GCF stands for greatest common factor of each term of the polynomial. So it's 3x. You see how we break it down now? It's 3x times 4x squared minus 6x plus 9. So this is one way how to factor out the GCF. In conclusion, factoring out the greatest common factor result in a polynomial with similar coefficients and smaller exponents of the variables. This makes it easier to analyze the polynomial or factor it further. Common errors. Let's see what are the common errors in this situation. Remember to include the negative sign when factoring out of GCF, as for example, as we did here, of negative terms. Also, factoring out a -1 from a positive term generates 2 negative factors, as you see here. Because we factoring out -1, we do have to put this as a negative number, -2. Okay, let's move to the second one, which is going to be done by you guys in Google Docs. You have to answer both, copy the question from here. So in this way, I make sure you're watching the video, you're copying the notes, and you're solving them. This is going to be solved in Google Docs, and you're going to turn it in when the due date is. Okay, let me give you a concept summary overview so you know you can go back and you can see it. Okay, let's see. All right. All right, concept summary. Factoring polynomials. As you see, you have it here in words and you have in algebra. In words, it says that determine if a polynomial can be factored. This is the first, very important. If it can be factored. If the polynomial can be factored, find the greatest common factor of the term and factor it out. In algebra, we given an example, which is 18x to the third power times y to the second power plus 12x to the second power times y plus 15x. Now we find the GCF of the terms as we did in the examples from the lesson. So we break down the coefficients. 18, which is 2 times 3 times 3, and x to the third power is x times x times x, and y to the second power is y times y. And we break down the coefficient here by 2 times 2 times 3, and x to the second power, which is x times x, and times y, the last one, the last variable. And the last coefficient is 15, which is 3 times 5, and we bring down x. So the greatest common factor of 18x to the third power times y to the second power plus 12x squared times y plus 15x is 3x. And we identify the remaining factors of the polynomial after factoring out the GCF. Then write it in a factored form, which is 3x times 6x squared times y squared plus 4xy plus 5. And this is the lesson. Good luck, you guys, and do your class work.